Blacksmithing and risk-taking. What does that mean, and how does that really apply to most of us in the blacksmith shop? Well, there are lots of different risks in blacksmithing, or in anything in life for that matter, and I don't just mean physical risk, although I may talk about that a little bit, but there are other types of risk. If you are an artist and you make a piece with great social impact, you are risking your reputation as an artist, because people are either going to love it or they're going to hate it. And if they love it, you're golden. People are going to love you forever. And if they hate it, you might as well look for another job. And of course, there is financial risk. You go out on a limb and you buy a bunch of blacksmithing tools and equipment. Maybe you buy a brand new power hammer that represents an entire year's net income for your blacksmith shop. And maybe it pays off, maybe it doesn't. That could be the decision that makes your business profitable, or it could be the decision that bankrupts your business. That's a risk that you take when you're in the business of blacksmithing, is what equipment is good for you, what equipment isn't. And nobody can answer that. Nobody can tell you ahead of time if that's a risk you should be taking or if that's a risk you should be avoiding, because you are unique, your business is unique, and your situation is unique. One of the main things I want to talk about in risk-taking actually comes from a book, and I think it is the worst book that you should go out and read. And that is The Art and Nature of Workmanship. At least I think that's the title. I can't find my copy of it right now to read it. And I believe the author was David Pye. And I will do some research online. I'll find that. I'll put a link below where you can go someplace and buy a copy of the book if you want to. But now that I've told you it's a terrible book, you may not want to. And the reason it's terrible is it is just dry, it's theory, it's academics, but it brings up some very good points. And the more you are in the craft of blacksmithing, the more you deal with artists and craftspeople, the more you're going to hear the concepts presented in that book. So it pays to be educated on those concepts and understand what people are talking about when they refer to the craftsmanship of certainty or the craftsmanship of risk. The craftsmanship of certainty refers to things that are computer controlled. If you just plug in the program and you say start, and it makes the piece for you, whether it's on a CNC machine or whether it's a 3D printer or whatever, but the computer is controlling that, there is little risk of you making a mistake. As long as the computer program's right and functioning properly, you can make one or you can make 100. They're all going to be exactly alike. No sweat, no problem. You don't have to have any skill. There is no risk. On the other hand, the craftsmanship of risk relies primarily on your skill as a craftsperson. That's the work you do at the anvil with hammer in hand. You are shaping and creating, and at any moment you might get a wrong blow and destroy hours worth of work. You might accidentally burn something up in the fire. If you're chiseling an element on something, you might accidentally cut that element off and destroy it. You are at risk of failure the entire time, and that requires much greater skill on your part as a craftsperson and as a blacksmith. And of course, there are extremes of both of these things. The furthest extreme of craftsmanship of risk would probably be starting with iron ore, doing your own smelt, and using very primitive tools to create more things and try to do really grand work with very simple, very basic tools. Versus the craftsmanship of certainty, like I said, is CNC machinery. And as you come into the middle, there are things that take some of the risk out. You make jigs, you make fixtures, things that guarantee you're going to get that little ring just right, or a scroll form that guarantees that all the scrolls in your project are going to work just right. But there's still a certain amount of risk because you're still drawing the pieces out by hand. Even if you're using a power hammer, you can screw things up in a single blow that you've been working on for quite some time. So power hammers with jigs and dies don't eliminate the risk, but they can take some of it away. And truthfully, we are all somewhere in the middle of this process all the time. And there is really no one right place to be. If you're running a business and you need to make 1 million identical items, you need that computer-controlled machine. This is not a place for one-off, handmade craftsmanship. On the other hand, if you are running a small blacksmith shop that is based on the unique character of hand-forged ironwork, the craftsmanship of risk probably enhances your work and makes your work more attractive to the average customer. Like I say, there's no right or wrong. I'm not trying to tell you you have to do things with the most basic, most primitive tools and embrace the craftsmanship of risk in everything you do in the shop. Nor am I telling you that you should avoid using computer-controlled machines at all costs because that does the work for you. It's just up to what you need to do in your shop. And while I found this particular book to be a very difficult read, it was required reading before I took a master class with Dan Nauman quite some number of years ago. He said, you need to read this before you take the class. And it was painful. And back then I thought I was just wasting time reading it. I really didn't enjoy it at all. But now I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I understand the concept. I start to recognize more that the work that I appreciate when I look at other people's work, whether it is pottery, whether it is stained glass work, whether it is forged iron work, woodworking, that the more risk there was in the creation of the piece, generally the more impressed I am. I'm not impressed mechanical marvels that were created by computer as much as I am smaller, more delicate things that are hand filed and hand forged or hand carved, because I recognize the skill of the craftsman in those pieces. But that's just some random thoughts on the subject. Of course, as I mentioned, there are other risks in blacksmithing. And as long as I'm going to do a video that talks about risk, I feel like I should talk a little bit about the physical risk of blacksmithing. If I think about my life and everything I have done in my life, I suppose I've always been a risk taker when it comes to the physical things. I've been a rock climber, I've been an ice climber, I've gone scuba diving, all things that have a certain amount of risk in them. My career was as a firefighter, and the old story is that you tell everybody to get out of a burning building and the firefighters go into the burning building. So there is definitely a lot of risk involved with that. And we all accept a certain level of risk in everything we do in our life. There are people who would not get on a bicycle or a motorcycle. There are even people who wouldn't drive a car because it scares them so much and they are not willing to accept that level of risk. Whereas most of us are willing to accept that level of risk. Some of us would ride a motorcycle without a helmet. Personally, I would not ride a motorcycle without a helmet. That isn't a risk I'm willing to accept. So it's just a matter of what risk that you're willing to accept, and that applies to blacksmithing as well. Power hammers and presses can be very dangerous pieces of equipment. It's very easy for one split second of misjudgment to really ruin your day. So if you're using that equipment, you have to have accepted that risk. I can't accept that risk for you. Don't let me convince you that this stuff is completely safe and you're never going to get hurt in the shop, because that simply isn't true. Sooner or later, if you're blacksmithing, you're going to get cut, you're going to get burned, you're going to get something in your eye. Something is going to happen to you that isn't going to be the most fun in the world, and you personally have to accept that risk in your shop. For some people, that means they never work without steel-toed boots, long sleeves, full face shield, welding gauntlets. They are as covered and protected as they can possibly get. And there are other people out there in the world who are working barefoot. They're wearing shorts, maybe no shirt, don't have any eye protection, don't have any hearing protection. And that is a level of risk that they accept in their shop. Largely it's due to a difference in societal pressure and societal norms on what is and is not acceptable risk. But that is what is acceptable to them, so that is what they do. So as you watch YouTube videos and you see somebody doing something that you think, ooh, that looks a little bit dangerous, it is up to you to adjust that procedure for you. It is not up to you to tell that other person, hey, you shouldn't be wearing flip-flops while you're forging. They're doing it because they accept that risk. That's their problem. And while I would never even come to the shop in flip-flops, sandals, or any kind of open footwear, there are lots of people in the world who do that. I've seen people at blacksmithing conferences that do that. That's their business, and that's the level of risk they're willing to accept. So while I absolutely encourage you to be safe in the shop, you also have to accept that a shop is a dangerous place. There's machinery waiting to bite you. There's hot iron waiting to burn you. Every piece of metal probably has a sharp edge on it somewhere that is waiting to cut you. Things are loud. They want to destroy your hearing. There's flying dust, the occasional flying wire bristle from a brush, all sorts of stuff waiting to get into your eye, and you have to accept that there's a risk, even if you're wearing safety glasses, even if you're wearing a full face shield, even if you're wearing gauntlets and gloves and a leather jacket and all that stuff, there is still a risk every time you come into the blacksmith shop. So whether you're facing an artistic risk in making a decision on a big commission that you're working on, financial risk by buying new equipment or simply investing in blacksmithing in general, facing physical risk by being in a shop in the first place, or engaging in the craftsmanship of risk. The level of risk you accept in your shop is your business and your business alone, and you have to decide what level of risk in all of those aspects you are personally willing to take. I hope that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed the little discussion. Give it a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends, but then by all means, get out to your shop, make something. But I do encourage you to stay safe, and I do encourage you to wear your safety glasses. But in the long run, those are decisions you have to make. We'll see you for the next one.